October 31st, 1988. Denton County, Texas. Sheriff's Deputy Marcus Holland thought he was responding to a routine vandalism call at the Old Alton Bridge. Local teenagers, probably drunk on Halloween mischief, spray painting pentagrams on the aging iron structure. According to folklore, Oscar Washburn, a black goat farmer, had lived near the bridge in the 1930s. His success breeding goats had angered local Klansmen who lynched him from the bridge one August night. His body was never found, but locals claim the entries dated from 1889 to 1917, scattered and fragmentary, but they detailed ceremonies unlike anything in Wiccan tradition. These weren't gentle Earth Mother rituals. The Crimson Star worshipped something called the Horned Sovereign, not Satan, the text insisted, but an older entity. Pre-Christian, pre-civilization even, a god of crossroads and boundaries, of thresholds between worlds. The rituals required blood sacrifice, animal at first, to open the gates. The text promised power, the ability to see hidden things, to influence events, to transcend human limitation. Most of the group laughed. David Portman called it obvious fiction, probably written by someone mocking occult practitioners. Jennifer Caldwell said it gave her an unsettled feeling and suggested they ignore it. But Linda Kaufman asked Marcus if she could study the journal, just for a week, just to understand the historical context. Marcus agreed, though later he'd testify he felt uncomfortable about her intensity. Linda returned the journal 3 weeks later with pages of notes. She'd researched the names mentioned in the text, cross-referenced them with historical records. The Order of the Crimson Star had been real, a small group that had operated near Marshall, Texas before mysteriously dissolving in 1917. And the Horned Sovereign wasn't Satan. It was older, stranger. Linda had found references in medieval grimoires, in Celtic mythology, in shamanic traditions across cultures. What if, Linda asked at that Wednesday meeting, we tried one ritual, just to see what happens? The group fractured. Jennifer and Stephen stopped attending immediately. The Portmans were hesitant but curious. Their bookstore's business model depended on exploring fringe spiritual practices. Thomas Bridger, the chemistry teacher, approached it as an experiment. Marcus Webb, as a folklorist, wanted to observe. Trish Morrison later testified she stayed because she was in love with Linda and would have followed her anywhere. 4 people committed fully. 3 remained peripheral. And 1, Jennifer Caldwell, would later wish she'd done more to stop what began that November night. The first ceremony occurred on November 15, 1983, at Old Alton Bridge. Linda insisted the location was crucial. Crossroads held power, and bridges served as thresholds between worlds. The Goatman legend added resonance. They performed the ritual at midnight, following the journal's instructions precisely. They sacrificed a chicken purchased from a rural farmer who sold livestock. The ritual involved placing the chicken in a circle of salt while reciting incantations from the journal. When Linda slit the chicken's throat, she collected its blood in a clay bowl and marked each participant's forehead. Then they poured the blood into Hickory Creek while calling to the Horned Sovereign, asking him to open their eyes to hidden truths. Nothing happened. At least, nothing they could see. But all 4 participants reported vivid dreams that night. Marcus Webb dreamed of standing at a crossroads while a figure with antlers watched from the tree line. Linda dreamed she could see colored lights emanating from people, revealing their emotions and intentions. Thomas Bridger dreamed of his deceased father speaking to him, revealing the location of a lost family heirloom. Trish Morrison dreamed of fire and couldn't shake a feeling of being watched. When they reconvened the following Wednesday, everyone had stories. Thomas had found the heirloom, a pocket watch, exactly where his dream indicated, hidden in his mother's attic. Linda insisted she could now perceive people's auras. Marcus had researched the crossroads from his dream and discovered it was an actual location in East Texas where multiple murders had occurred in the 1920s. The rational explanations were obvious. Coincidence, suggestion, cryptomnesia. Thomas had probably seen the pocket watch as a child and forgotten. But the group wanted to believe. They wanted meaning and magic in a world that felt increasingly mundane and frightening. They performed the ritual again on December 13th, this time with 2 chickens. The journal indicated that repeated sacrifices would strengthen the connection, would bring them closer to the Horned Sovereign's realm. Again, vivid dreams. Again, strange coincidences. Rachel Portman, who'd attended this, Thomas Bridger said his chemistry knowledge had expanded exponentially. He understood molecular structures intuitively now, could predict reactions without calculations. Marcus Webb insisted he could sense spiritual presences in locations, could communicate with something he couldn't quite name. The journal had warned about hubris. The final entries, dated 1917, cautioned that the Horned Sovereign demanded respect, that he granted power but expected devotion, that those who sought to use him for selfish purposes would be consumed. Linda either didn't read those warnings or chose to ignore them. If this story is giving you chills, hit that like button. Share this with someone who loves dark mysteries. Let's discover what happens next. The Discovery, Halloween 1988. The jogger's name was Patricia Emmons, a 42-year-old accountant training for a marathon. She ran the trails around Old Alton Bridge 3 mornings a week, usually arriving around dawn when the air was cool and the paths empty. October 31st, 1988, she noticed the smell first. Metallic and rotten, carried on the breeze from Hickory Creek. Then she saw the shapes arranged in the mud beneath the bridge. At first, her brain couldn't process what her eyes registered. 7 dead goats formed a perfect heptagram, their throats cut, their blood soaking into the creek bed. Each goat had been partially skinned, revealing muscle tissue and bone. But it was the center of the formation that made Patricia run to the nearest house and scream for them to call 911. A human figure lay in the center, surrounded by candles that had burned down to stubs. The body was arranged in a specific position, arms outstretched, legs together, forming a living cross. The person's chest had been cut open, though not deeply. Symbols had been carved into the skin, and the person was still breathing, barely, their lips moving in what might have been speech or prayer or delirium. Deputy Holland arrived within 12 minutes. The paramedics came 3 minutes later. The person, a woman, they determined, was alive but unresponsive, hypothermic, in shock. She'd been lying in that position for hours, possibly the entire night. The EMTs loaded her into an ambulance while Holland secured the scene. His flashlight illuminated details that would haunt his nightmares for decades. The symbols carved into the creek bed around the heptagram matched no gang signs or occult symbols he recognized. The goats had been killed recently, within the last 6 hours, he estimated, and scattered around the scene were ritual implements, a clay bowl, a curved knife, several leather-bound journals, and a human skull painted with red ochre. When the sun finally rose, revealing the full scope of the scene, Holland called his supervisor and requested FBI assistance. The woman was identified as Patricia Trish Morrison, age 38, the same waitress who'd joined Linda Kaufman's group 6 years earlier. At the hospital, doctors treated her for hypothermia, dehydration, and the cuts on her chest, superficial but deliberate, forming patterns they couldn't interpret. When Trish regained consciousness, she spoke only 2 sentences before requesting a lawyer. "We opened the door. We never should have opened the door." The FBI's involvement brought Special Agent Caroline Rhodes, who specialized in cult-related crimes. Throughout 1988, law enforcement had dealt with numerous cases connected to satanic panic hysteria. Most proved to be false allegations, moral panics that destroyed innocent lives. Rhodes approached the Goatman Bridge scene with appropriate skepticism, but the evidence forced her to reconsider. The journals found at the scene documented 6 years of rituals. Linda Kaufman's handwriting filled hundreds of pages, describing ceremonies, recording observations, tracking the group's supposed progression toward enlightenment. The entries grew increasingly erratic after 1986. Linda wrote about visions of the Horned Sovereign, about receiving instructions directly from him. She wrote about needing stronger sacrifices, about the animal blood losing its efficacy. She wrote about identifying Trish as the willing vessel, who would complete the transformation. The October 30th entry, written just hours before Patricia Emmons discovered the scene, was brief. "Tonight we open the final gate. Trish has agreed to cross over and bring back proof of the Sovereign's realm. We will document everything. If this succeeds, the world will know we were right." But where were the other 8 members of the Covenant? The investigation expanded rapidly. FBI agents searched Linda Kaufman's apartment and found it essentially empty, cleared of personal belongings, stripped of anything that might indicate where she'd gone. Her bank account had been emptied 3 days before Halloween. Her employer said she'd quit without notice on October 27th. The Portman's bookstore was closed, a going-out-of-business sign in the window. Neighbors said they'd seen Rachel and David loading boxes into a U-Haul on October 28th. No forwarding address. Thomas Bridger had stopped showing up to teach chemistry at Denton High School on October 25th. His principal had called repeatedly, receiving no answer. When police entered his apartment, they found lesson plans laid out through November. He'd been preparing for his classes even while planning to disappear. Marcus Webb's dissertation advisor at UNT reported that Marcus had withdrawn from the program on October 24th, citing personal reasons. He'd taken all his research materials with him. Of the 9 members of the Covenant, only Trish Morrison remained. And she wasn't talking beyond her initial cryptic statement. Special Agent Rhodes built the case methodically. She interviewed Jennifer Caldwell, who provided crucial information about the group's early days. She tracked down the farmer who'd sold them goats. He remembered Linda as a pleasant customer who paid cash and never made small talk. She obtained permits for ground-penetrating radar at Old Alton Bridge. The radar revealed anomalies in the creek bed. When the dig commenced on November 15, 1988, investigators found bones buried in shallow graves, dozens of animal skeletons, chickens, rabbits, goats, all showing signs of ritual slaughter. But more disturbing, they found 3 human skulls. Forensic analysis dated the skulls to different time periods. One was approximately 150 years old, possibly connected to the original Order of the Crimson Star. The other 2 were more recent, one from the 1970s, one from the early 1980s. Both showed signs of perimortem trauma consistent with sacrifice rituals. Rhodes theorized that Linda's group had discovered existing burial sites and incorporated the skulls into their ceremonies. Or perhaps something darker. Perhaps the original order had continued in some form, and Linda had connected with surviving practitioners. The investigation into those 2 recent skulls opened cold cases, but identifying the remains proved impossible. Trish Morrison finally agreed to speak in December 1988, granted immunity in exchange for testimony. Her account was disturbing. She described how the rituals had intensified after 1986. Linda had become convinced they needed human participation at the deepest level. Not murder, Linda insisted that wasn't necessary, but a willing vessel who would undergo a ritual death and rebirth, who would cross into the Horned Sovereign's realm and return transformed. Trish had volunteered. She loved Linda. She believed in the Covenant's mission, and part of her wanted to escape her mundane life, wanted to become something transcendent. The final ritual had been planned meticulously. The entire group would participate, but Trish would be the focus. They'd carved the symbols into her chest, painful but bearable. They'd arranged her in the center of the heptagram while chanting invocations from the journal. They'd administered a drug, DMT, Thomas Bridger had synthesized using his chemistry knowledge to facilitate Trish's journey into other realms. "I saw things," Trish testified, her voice hollow. "Or I thought I saw things. A forest made of bones, a sky the color of blood. And something watching me from between the trees. Something with antlers that spread like branches, like lightning frozen in bone. It spoke, but not with words. It showed me what they'd promised we'd become. What Linda believed we were becoming." "What was that?" Rhodes asked. "Hollow," Trish said. "We were becoming hollow. Empty vessels for something else to wear. That's what the Horned Sovereign wanted. Not worshippers, not servants, just empty bodies it could inhabit when it needed to cross into our world." Trish described regaining consciousness alone beneath the bridge as dawn approached. The others had vanished. They'd left her there, perhaps believing the ritual complete, perhaps fleeing when something went wrong. She didn't know. She couldn't remember clearly. The manhunt for the remaining 8 members of the Covenant produced frustrating results. Credit card transactions placed Rachel Portman in Oregon in January 1989. A possible sighting of Thomas Bridger in New Mexico. But nothing concrete, nothing that led to arrests. Then, in March 1989, hikers discovered a burned-out van in the Angeles National Forest outside Los Angeles. Inside were 6 bodies, burned beyond easy recognition. Dental records eventually confirmed their identities: Linda Kaufman, David and Rachel Portman, Marcus Webb, and the 2 college students who joined later. They'd died from cyanide poisoning before the fire started. A group suicide, investigators concluded. A note found in a fireproof box referenced crossing together and joining the Sovereign in his realm. The handwriting matched Linda Kaufman's. But Thomas Bridger and Stephen Royce were not among the bodies. To this day, their whereabouts remain unknown. Occasional alleged sightings surface. Bridger spotted in Portland, Royce in Austin, but none confirmed. The FBI keeps the case open, though Rhodes retired in 2003, and the current agents assigned to it have little hope of resolution. Trish Morrison received psychiatric treatment and eventually rebuilt her life. She changed her name legally and moved to the Pacific Northwest, declining all interview requests. In 2015, a journalist tracked her down and she agreed to a brief phone conversation. "I was looking for meaning," she said. "We all were. We wanted to believe we were special, that we discovered something real. But all we found was how easy it is to lose yourself in a story, to confuse belief with truth. The scariest part isn't what we thought we summoned. It's how normal we all were before Linda convinced us we could be more. Broader implications, lessons from the Covenant. The Goatman Bridge murders, though technically only the animal sacrifices qualified as murders, became a footnote in the broader satanic panic narrative. By 1988, the panic was reaching its peak. The McMartin preschool trial dominated headlines. Geraldo Rivera's Devil Worship, Exposing Satan's Underground aired to millions. Claims of satanic ritual abuse proliferated, most later debunked as false memories implanted by overzealous therapists and prosecutors. The Covenant of the Crimson Star fit uncomfortably into this landscape. They weren't Satanists. The journals made that clear. They weren't abusing children or engaging in the wild conspiracies that characterize satanic panic allegations. They were adults who'd gotten progressively lost in a dangerous delusion, culminating in reckless endangerment and animal cruelty. But their case raised disturbing questions about group dynamics and the human need for transcendence. Dr. Sarah Morrison, a cult researcher at UCLA, no relation to Trish Morrison, studied the Covenant extensively. Her 1993 book, Seeking the Sovereign, Small Groups and Dangerous Beliefs, analyzed how the group's trajectory followed classic cult formation patterns. A charismatic leader, Linda Kaufman, attracted seekers experiencing life transitions. They started with relatively benign practices before gradually escalating. The group developed its own internal logic, increasingly isolated from external reality checking. Dissent was discouraged. The leader's pronouncements became unchallengeable truth. And ultimately, the group pursued transcendence to the point of self-destruction. What makes the Covenant unusual, Dr. Morrison wrote, is how ordinary they remained for so long. Linda Kaufman kept her dental hygiene job for 4 years while conducting rituals. Thomas Bridger taught chemistry to teenagers every weekday. They compartmentalized effectively, which made their escalation more dangerous. There were few warning signs visible to the broader community. The case influenced how law enforcement approached occult-related crimes. After the Satanic Panic's excesses became clear, lives ruined by false allegations, innocent people imprisoned based on coerced testimonies, agencies needed frameworks for distinguishing genuine criminal activity from religious persecution. The Covenant provided a useful case study. Actual crimes committed, animal cruelty, endangerment, possibly grave robbing, documented through evidence rather than coerced confessions, prosecutable without reference to belief systems. Old Alton Bridge itself underwent changes. Denton County installed better lighting and increased police patrols. But the Goatman legend only grew stronger, now incorporating the Covenant's rituals. Ghost hunters claimed to sense 9 presences beneath the bridge. 7 members who died in California, plus the 2 who vanished. Amateur occultists still visit, leaving offerings and attempting their own rituals, despite trespassing warnings. In 2012, a group of teenagers performed what they called a Crimson Star ceremony at the bridge, sacrificing a chicken they'd stolen from a 4-H project. They were arrested, charged with animal cruelty and trespassing, and sentenced to community service. During the trial, one teen testified they'd found instructions on a website dedicated to the Covenant. The site has since been taken down, but others have appeared, romanticizing Linda Kaufman's group as misunderstood seekers who'd achieved real contact with other realms. This romanticization disturbs former investigators. They see the mystery and the drama, Agent Rhodes said in a 2002 interview. They don't see Trish Morrison's scars or the terror in her eyes when she described what she experienced. They don't see those burned bodies in the van. They create a story that serves their need for meaning, just like the Covenant did, and that's what makes it dangerous. Not ancient evil or supernatural entities, but our willingness to believe comforting fictions about ourselves. Perhaps that's the lasting lesson from Goatman Bridge, not that satanic cults lurk in America's shadows. Most don't exist outside imagination, not that occult rituals can summon dark powers. No credible evidence supports such claims, but that ordinary people seeking meaning in a complex world can convince themselves of extraordinary things. That charismatic leaders can guide groups toward danger, while everyone involved believes they're pursuing enlightenment. That the line between religion and delusion, between faith and fanaticism, remains disturbingly thin. The 2 human skulls found beneath the bridge were never identified. They remain in evidence storage in Denton County, testifying to crimes that may have occurred decades before the Covenant formed. Perhaps they belonged to victims of the original Order of the Crimson Star. Perhaps they were grave robbery victims, stolen by Linda's group to add authenticity to their rituals. The truth died with 6 people in a burned van and 2 who vanished without trace. But Old Alton Bridge still stands, iron rusting slowly, spanning Hickory Creek the same way it has since 1884. The Goat Man legend persists, now layered with new horror. And on certain nights, when fog rolls off the creek and moonlight filters through the bridge's lattice structure, you can almost convince yourself that the boundary between worlds grows thin there. That something watches from just beyond human perception. That Linda Kaufman's covenant might have been wrong about almost everything, except their choice of location. What do you think drove Linda Kaufman and her followers to such extreme acts? Was this a case of shared delusion amplified by group dynamics, or did they encounter something real at Old Alton Bridge? Leave your theories in the comments below. We read every one, and your insights often shape our future investigations. If you found this deep dive into one of Texas's strangest cases compelling, make sure you're subscribed to Fierce Sermon for more lost chapters of American history. Ring that notification bell so you never miss when we uncover the next disturbing story hiding in plain sight. Next week we're investigating the Mercy Brown vampire exorcism of 1892. How tuberculosis, folklore, and grief drove a Rhode Island family to dig up their dead. The medical records will shock you. Until then, stay curious, stay skeptical, and remember, the most terrifying stories are the ones we tell ourselves. See you in the next video.